We've traveled a hard road. We've grown, finding certainty in instability and adapting from a mindset of survival to one of prosperity. Opportunity awaits those who embrace a world where digital and physical are a choice in experience, not a choice in quality. We believe that business will transform society through technology. We believe it's time to reimagine the role your business will play in a rapidly evolving digital world. Reimagine growth. Our goal is to reinvent your and your customers' experience of the world. Partner with us to achieve that goal and see your ambitions come to life. Reimagine excellence and discover infinite opportunities. As one of Africa's largest systems integrators, BCX is transforming the continent's digital future through deep industry knowledge, world-class solutions, and an extensive partner ecosystem. Reimagine evolution. Give your business the power to grow. BCX, our most important customer, is yours.
Good morning and welcome to everyone to this prestigious event hosted by BCX under the theme, The Future of Power in SA. There's a beautiful quotation that I like by Leo Sweet that says, "The future is not something that we enter. The future is something that we create." We are gathered here today to discuss the future of power so that we may be empowered and know how we can create the future that we want as far as the energy trajectory is concerned in South Africa. As South Africa, we have been experiencing a series of load shedding dating back as a decade and a half. And today, it's even getting worse. Last year was worse, with about 13% of the time of power cuts. And this year, the situation is even getting worse. So today, as we are gathered, I've got a panel with me to discuss the issue regarding the future of power. I am Temperance Sebele. I'm an energy consultant. And with me, I have Ted Bloom, an energy consultant. He's going to introduce himself.
Good morning. I'm Ted Blom, and I'm a mining and energy analyst, and I've been involved in the energy sphere for the best part of the last 30 years.
Thank you, Ted. And I've got Lungile Mashele, a renowned energy economist. She's going to introduce herself.
Good morning. My name is Lungile Mashele, energy economist, and I've been working in the energy space for the last 15 years.
Thank you, Lungile. And by my side here, I've got Gideon Kruger, the CEO of Lalela Retail. He's going to introduce himself.
Hi everyone, welcome. My name is Gideon. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Lalela Retail. We specialize in providing innovative backup power solutions to residential and to corporate clients.
Thank you, Gideon. I'll hand over to Benny, the managing executive of BCX. After you introduce yourself, Benny, just quickly take us through what BCX is.
So thank you. Morning, everyone. Yeah, so I'm Benny Swan. I'm the managing exec at BCX. BCX, as a subsidiary of Telkom, is one of the largest system integrators on this African continent. Now, being in this position, we deal with customers around various sectors. So we've got customers in every industry, from retail, mining, industrial, financial services, corporate customers, and they often see us as their trusted advisors. So we build and create solutions for our customers in the way that we learn, live, and work. Now, in very recent, we get questions from our customers: how do we deal with the power issue? How do we deal with backup power? How do we keep our operations running? How do we keep our staff operational and productive when they're at home during load shedding? Our retailers want to know, how do they keep their point of sales running? So we've got various solutions in this space, but we thought it's a good idea to actually get the experts in a room to talk to our customers and staff on the future of power, so we all can make informative decisions on the future of the stability of the group. How do we deal with costing around power issues?
Yes, thank you, Benny, for that. So basically, our online audience, you are free to pop up questions as we go along with the conversation. You are part of the conversation. We need to come up with solutions together. So please feel free and be part of this conversation. Basically, our agenda, we will discuss the ESCOM status and the challenges, and we want to come up with the solutions and what financing options and incentives are available for the customers, for the BCX customers. So please feel free and take part. Ted, just to set the mood, may you please take us through on how did we even get here? Why is South Africa in such a mess in terms of power?
Thank you. Okay, so I think the average household and business owner is currently facing a number of issues. Amongst rising electricity tariffs, which are already going through the roof, massive corruption, which is rife at Eskom, coal shortages from time to time because Eskom hasn't rolled out their coal roadmap. We've now also got generation issues with major breakdowns because the plant is not properly maintained and spares is a problem. And then on top of it, the reason why we're all crying when there's load shedding is because Eskom supplies 90% of the country's power. So if I'm out of power, you're going to be out of power, we're all going to be out of power together. So that's really why we are here today, is to try and see if we can steer our way around these issues. And just to recap, I mean, how did we get here? And this route actually starts in 1998, when the government published the Energy White Paper, which indicated that they were of the opinion that they wanted to sort of privatize or semi-privatize energy provision. However, that didn't go the way it was planned, and it was only half-heartedly implemented because the private sector was keen to do the power generation, but they weren't very happy with the caps in terms of profitability that the government set up for them. And the cap was at 8%, and I don't think any business can operate on a gross margin of 8%. It's just too lean. And that's why we didn't have major uptake from the private sector. So the route that was then followed is Eskom was commercialized in 2001, and which was a major change for Eskom, a major change in the culture of the organization. Because from 1923 to 2001, it was operated as a non-profit entity, an NGO by statute, and all they had to do is break even. And so Eskom then was actually the lever or the generator of not just electricity, but also technology development, training, and many other spheres for not just South Africa, but the whole of Southern Africa, the SADC. So with the major change in focus in 2001, you basically had the same people being told to pursue a different goal, and that was making profits. And nobody within Eskom actually was equipped with the right mindset as to how you change an organization that just has to break even to making profits. So they were it was trial and error, and basically we've seen more errors than trials. And this was exacerbated in 2001 when Majuba Colliery was officially opened. The coal mine to supply it failed. And that really created a big problem for Eskom because they bargained on that power station generating 3,600 megawatts of power, and suddenly there was no power available. So what the board then did is they started the emergency mandate to allow Eskom staff to buy coal from anywhere just to get this coal power station going. And that, of course, led to corruption because there was no standards, there was no protocols, there was no templates for contracts, and every Tom, Dick, and Harry was just peddling coal on the back of a cigarette box at any price. And that's really where the corruption started. And that mandate was for 6 years. In 2007, it was renewed. In 2014, it was renewed again because there's nobody at Eskom who had the savvy to know how to transcend from a non-profit to a profit and do it in a reasonable and responsible manner. On top of that, because Eskom was now a private entity, everybody wanted bigger salaries, bigger titles, and bigger budgets. So that didn't help the productivity within Eskom at that time. In 2008, Eskom went out to tender and they wanted to create 3 new power stations, Medupi, Kusile, and Ngula. However, even with that tender process, it was terribly corrupted. The initial tender came, as I saw with my own eyes, it was 34 billion, which is in line with the Mundra power station in India at 35 billion rand. By the time Eskom's board got hold of it, it doubled to 68 billion rand. And from there, it's just been escalating as well over 150 billion rand, only for Medupi, which isn't functioning. Similar and ditto with Kusile, which didn't have a tender, and Ngula went from 9 billion budget to 40 billion completed cost. So yes, things started running very awry, and us as the consumers and people reliant on Eskom have just been falling off the bus.
Yeah, true. Yes. Okay, so what's the status? Is there any hope with whatever that you have said now?
Well, just to have a look at where Eskom's saying they are going, because we're still 90% reliant on Eskom, and it's only in the last year that the president has lifted the cap. So if you look at the forward for the next year or so, basically in every week, Eskom's maintenance program is such, we're trying to catch up with the backlog, that there will probably be load shedding in most weeks going forward. Winter and summer, which is highly unusual, because normally Eskom only had constraints during the winter period when demand was much higher. So yes, for the next 5 years, there's not much light at the end of the tunnel, because Eskom needs to now regenerate its generation capacity by fixing it up properly and start using the 50 gigawatts that's installed as opposed to the 27, which they're only capable of generating on any given day. So yes, as far as going forward is concerned, we can still look forward to a very, very rocky road. And I think anybody who's got responsibilities for workers and business, they need to start looking at alternatives if they can't survive 5 years of intermittent, unpredictable load shedding.
Yes, true. So Lungile, what's the load shedding outlook for the next 18 months? Since you are in the space.
So just to reiterate what Ted has said, we should experience, or we should expect rather, that we are going to load shed. And I think it's, we need to be honest also and then say that part of the compact that we had in the integrated resource plan of 2010, for instance, was that Eskom would maintain its plant and its availability at a certain level, above 70%, but that we would also have new generation coming in the form of Medupi, Kusile, and Ngula, which has come on in fits and starts, but then we've also had the renewables also come online. And if you look at the additional capacity that has been added onto the system since 2010, you are looking at over 12,000 megawatts. But for some reason, we are experiencing load shedding in this country. If you look at our installed capacity and you look at what we demand on any given day, it really does not make sense. And the key thing is what Ted has been talking about, that we need to look at reliability maintenance, but also looking at that, it is very imperative that we understand that you need skills, you need people, you need money, you need planning. You don't just wake up in the morning and say, I think I want to do maintenance there, and I only have 6 hours in which to do maintenance. That's not how it's done at all. You need to know, what is my plan at T-24, at T-12, at T-6, at T-3, what do I want to do? What are all the stage gates? What are all the things that have to be in place in order for me to run an effective reliability maintenance program? And this is where Eskom is actually just falling short.
Yes, I was listening to Jan Oberholzer the other day, and he was saying the country needs about 60 gigawatts of energy. But currently, what do we have? We have only 45, and we short also of 4 to 8 gigawatts of energy. So how do we really trust in Eskom in such a situation? What are the risks that we have if we trust in Eskom?
Okay, I think just to get everybody on the same page, I think we need to go to a slide and just look at Eskom's slide of their own availability. And as Lungile said, the benchmark that where Eskom was in 2001, it had 90% availability. But the benchmark around the world is trying to have availability of around about 80%. If you go to the graph, you can see that it's dropped from 2001 all the way down to where we are at the moment. And then we see Eskom sort of projections going forward, but there's no substance behind their projections, because they're only now realizing and taking to the board suggestions to improve and increase the maintenance. So yes, whilst Eskom is sort of showing a hockey stick recovery, the fact of the matter is that they haven't been able to recover in the last 3 years under the new management team. And analysts in the industry are saying that the chances of a quick recovery is actually very, very minimal, and it's not going to happen, not in the next 5 years at least. And to add to that, I mean, we also talk about the renewables that have come on stream, and everybody is very gung-ho about the renewables. But if we take you to the next graph, sorry. I've missed the graph. There we are.
Yes.
If you look at the performance of renewables, you'll see that it's very, very erratic. And nobody can run an electricity system on power that's so erratic. You can't predict when it's available. You can't predict when it's going to fall away. And just the inertia and the volatility of the supply wreaks havoc with any grid system. So renewables, whilst they are useful and can serve a purpose at domestic level and at the own generation level, but from a grid perspective, it's just a nightmare to manage a system that has all this volatility in from hour to hour, from minute to minute. And I feel sorry for the grid operators because they've got to be alert all the time, otherwise we're going to end up with a blackout.
Yes, yes, true. Lungile, do you want to come in on the risks as well?
Sure. So I think one of the key risks, with this continued load shedding is what does it mean for the economy as a whole, really?
Yes.
Looking at not just your large entities such as your energy-intensive user groups, because they obviously run our industrialized economy. We have smelters that are not able to operate, mining houses, and this is why many of them now are looking at the embedded generation options, which we'll discuss a bit later. But it also impacts even on retail customers. It impacts on SMMEs, on the ability for kids to get an education. You will recall that for the last 10 years or so, the Gauteng Education Department has been working very hard to put everything on e-blackboards and make everything electronic. Now, how does that function when you have load shedding? How do you teach when you do not have electricity in the room? You have given students little iPads, and electronic notebooks. What are they supposed to do when they have not been charged? And it's not a question of just taking them home because they experience load shedding, not just load shedding, but load limiting also, particularly in the poor, like in the poorer areas. And looking at even SMMEs, how do they survive? We've seen numerous reports of, and especially this happened during stage 6 load shedding, how places like mortuaries were actually affected in terms of keeping bodies in a condition that made sense and that their families would not be distraught from the rotting and the decomposing that was actually happening. What happens when a person or a retail has to, a retail outlet has to stock meat, for instance, and then all of a sudden we are plunged into stage 6 load shedding for an entire week? That basically means that for 8 hours a day, that fridge is not operational. And they were never informed, they were never told that this might be happening in this particular week. Load shedding in this country is sporadic, so it basically means that everybody needs to grab what they can grab. And this is why oftentimes people will then go to market trying to get a generator or trying to get some kind of a solution, whether it's a trolley, and they're sold out. And of course, then there's the supply and demand issues where then if you're buying during that stage 6 time, prices have shot through the roof also. So the poorest of the poor always get impacted in terms of what is happening.
Yes, true. Load shedding doesn't only impact businesses and the residential, it also impacts communication. Benny, if you may take us through how your customers have been impacted by this load shedding.
No, thanks. So what we've seen our customers, I think mainly when there's load shedding, when the towers are down, we see connectivity issues and degradation of services. So we often ask our customer asks us, what alternative solutions do we have to get our connectivity at a fast, reliable speed? Other big operations is now with people working from home or in our hybrid scenarios, how do we keep our staff productive at home when they've got load shedding? We can do at our offices, we can create environment where there's predictable power, but not at people's homes. So the work from home is quite a big one. A lot of our retailers, as we said in the point of sale environment, how do we keep our point of sales up? Because that's their lifeline. So how do you keep the front stores running? For some of the banks come to us, say, how do they keep the bank's operations? But I think the biggest one is the data center. So a lot of customers got their own data centers, which they operate, but they don't have the investment to keep the data centers up and running. Now, BCX, one of the largest data center facilities in the continent, as we've got those solutions where our customers ask us, how do we move into your data centers and take the load of their data centers? And then cost. How our customers want to know, how can they predict costs, how can they deal with backup power, and what solutions can we then craft around that?
Yes, no, true. The load shedding effects cut across all industries, be it residential, be it commercial and industries. It's causing a massive impact. If you may just briefly take us through on how your residential customers suffer as well, just adding to what Lungile has already said.
Yeah, so I think we need to, take residential customers into two types of brackets. The first, obviously, load shedding affects, the residentials completely. When there's no power, you don't have lights, you're cold, you cannot cook. That's just from a basics needs perspective. Then we go into how does it affect you from a productivity perspective. Since the outbreak of COVID and the hybrid work from home scenario, is people are working from home remotely. And whilst you were at work, your business used to have a generator and life went on. Now when you're at home, from a work perspective, you cannot continue working because if you don't have a backup power solution, your internet goes down, you can't work. When you are a student, I know like a lot of students, specifically UNISA, working remotely, even if you're at the major universities, when you're at in-campus universities, you still need to submit assignments at home, their deadlines. These just create complications for residents and consumers working from home. It's really causing chaos amongst the board. And then just I think I want to call it, people never ever address the emotional effects of load shedding. Everyone always talks about the economic impact. What is it on the economy? What is it doing to, do I have lights? Can I cook? It's a very, very, very challenging and emotionally draining experience. And this is leading to a mass exodus of skills from the country. But even the people who can't leave, they are really, they're down. You want to get home, you've had a hard day at work, you've had a stressful day, you were busy working and you couldn't work, or if you're running a factory and your factory, had to stop because of load shedding, you're missing your budget, you're missing your target, your boss, you're under economic pressure. You want to sit down and you want to unwind, you want to watch TV. As you get home, there's load shedding. You can't even unwind in a recreational. So the emotional impact of load shedding is very much underestimated in the residential space.
Yes, true. Thanks for bringing that, Gideon. It's quite, mental health is a challenge as it is with all the things that we're going through. At the same time, load shedding adds to it. So recently, Cyril Ramaphosa came up with an energy plan, with that 5-point energy plan. If you can just briefly take us through it, Ted, will it solve problems?
Well, I think at the end of the day, the caps that have been put out by the government have been random. There's no rational reason for having caps on energy production. I think that it's such a crucial part of our economy that there really shouldn't be any caps. If anybody can think they can provide power and they can provide reliable power that's within the specs of safety and reliability, they should be allowed to do that. That's the first thing. So the caps have been lifted, but I think the caps are totally unnecessary. The President then also talked about Eskom accelerating and identifying certain key power stations to be refurbished properly. And that's another crux, is that power stations have not been properly maintained and properly serviced, and the skills to do that have also gone out of Eskom's doors. So that itself is not a quick fix. It's something that will take quite a long time. I mean, just to give you some background, a lot of the parts at Eskom, in fact, the whole power station, the heart of the power station is imported. So if you're now going to start repairing the power station, you need to get into a queue behind everybody else in the world who wants to upgrade or maintain their power station. And the waiting list for some parts is maybe 2 years, maybe 3 years for the heavy industrial parts. And we don't have that latitude. The other issue is that if you've got generation at home, I've had that experience. I thought I was clever. I went and bought 2 generators for my house. So one to be used and one for standby. But the problem is, every time I service them, and they don't last long before they need a service, the cost is the same as a new generator. So the costs are prohibitive, and they make a hang of a lot of noise as well. And my wife is a teacher, and the problem is that the load shedding comes at peak time at the moment. I mean, in future it will even get worse during the day. But at peak time, you get home, you're hungry. Your kids get home from school, they're hungry, they need to do homework. And from 6 or 5 o'clock until 9, 10 o'clock at night, you've got no power. I mean, that's probably, from a domestic point of view, the most critical time of day that you actually need power. And Eskom, unfortunately, has not prepared the grid for load shedding. If you go to a country like Mozambique, what they've done is they've separated their grid to CBD and domestic. Okay, so in the daytime, they give the CBD or business power, and in the evenings from 5 or 6 o'clock, they give the residential people power, because they understand that the need moves from the business or office to your household. Eskom has had 14 years to do something, and they've done nothing about it. And in fact, where we are at the moment, even that might be a big challenge, too big a challenge to actually accomplish, because we've now seen our CBDs move from Joburg CBD, for instance, to Sandton. So now you've got an integrated CBD and residential area. And somebody who's far cleverer than I am will need to apply their mind and separate the grid so that you can actually rotate power between where it's needed and where it's not needed, and vice versa in the morning. So I think we're facing major hurdles, and a lot can be done. We just need to apply our minds. People at Eskom need to catch a wake up and start applying solutions to reality, not to what they think is going to happen, but to what we are facing on a day-to-day basis.
True, yes, that's a lovely structure, really. Let's hope someone from Eskom is listening so that they can apply it. So continuing on the energy plan, if you may help us, Lungile.
I've been on record as saying that the country does not have an energy plan. What the president announced the other week was not a plan. It was a series of ideas and concepts that still need to be implemented and thought out, especially by the private sector more than anything else. So, you know, Ted mentioned the caps that have been lifted. So, you know, government says, okay, go out, you can build anything you want to build. There's no 100 megawatt cap, which is awesome. But we need to be very honest. At 100 megawatts, that is about 1.5 billion rand capital investment. Very few entities play in that space. That is your heavy energy intensive user groups. These are your smelters as well as your mines. And yes, they may take up those opportunities, but let's remember that they are not working on South Africa's scale and pace. So it's not like they are building for us, they're building for themselves. And to develop projects of that size is going to take a lot of time. And it's going to take money also. And this is what they've been busy with as the private sector. For the most part, the play has been around the 10 to 15 megawatts for various CNI. These are your corporate and industrial customers. And that's the space that they're more comfortable in. Again, they are looking at a series of various, interventions, but we'll touch on that, a bit later. Government also mentioned something about residential feed-in tariffs, that they encourage residential consumers to install solar PV panels on their rooftops, inverters, and to sell excess that they have onto the grid. South Africa, as it currently stands at the moment, this is not feasible for your municipalities. They don't even have feed-in tariffs. Much less, Eskom. We do not have that net metering capability that is required, so that I know what I'm selling and what I'm buying from, Eskom or from my municipality. That is not there. You also need that bi-directional feed from my house, for instance, to the municipality or to Eskom. And the key thing is that remember that the municipality or Eskom are not just going to come to one random house that is in Pretoria. So you sort of want to have a microgrid system that will make sense for everybody who's in that area. So looking at residential solar, if you could get a group of homeowners associations to actually install that PV and those batteries, and you have one point at which Eskom gets there or the municipality, that will make it a more viable business case for them. Government also spoke about the renewable energy projects and increasing that capacity to 5.2 gigs. This is solar and wind. And let me be very clear and say that is not going to stop load shedding at all. That is simply additional intermittent capacity, which is available anything between 20 to 30% of the time. Okay, so you still have that base load issue, which is what we're suffering with in this country. Hence, we spoke about the reliability also earlier on. The key thing is that we have not been able to close, this is financial close now, the risk mitigation IPP projects. Only, I think, 1 or 2 have reached financial close. We're still waiting on bid window 5, which has been extended and will most likely be extended again. And then, of course, government has now said, no, let's double up and let's expand, and we're going to have a bid window 6. It's all fine and well, but if you're not addressing the fundamental reasons why none of these other bid windows are actually closing, we're also not going to close bid window 6. And it speaks to supply chain issues, it speaks to costs, it speaks to the availability of panels. You've got a situation currently in Sichuan province in China where they've been load shedding because of their hydro issues, and their factories are actually shut down. Why is this important? Because Sichuan is where we get our solar panels from. Over 70% of the world's solar PV panels are made in Sichuan. So those factories are now shut. So solar panels are there, lithium-ion batteries are there, inverters, a number of things come from that province alone. So you can only imagine that when that supply chain blockage is actually lifted, Sichuan is going to ship to the highest bidders first, to their biggest customers, biggest clients, and Africa, South Africa, on the backlog, we're simply going to come on as and when we can afford things. So the panels might be there, but do we have the money to actually buy them, which is where these bid window 5 projects are sitting at now, where they are not feasible to actually continue at this point. So like I said, government announced a number of different initiatives, concepts, but now private sector needs to come in and say, where can we play, what can we do, because we cannot leave this up to government and to ESCOM anymore.
Yes, true. Allow me to take an online question. I saw something related to the tariffs. One listener is saying, I have a grid tight solar system with space capacity. During much of the day, I can assist ESCOM by feeding back into the grid, but my municipality is not keen because they will lose revenue. How do we reconcile these conflicts of interest? Lungile, you can take that then, Ted.
So the key thing is that, yes, there will be a loss of revenue to the municipality, but we need to move away from that point. We are in a dynamic environment, and we need to start adapting. And one of the key things is obviously going to these municipalities, and they need to wake up to what is happening in this space. They cannot be protected forever. One of the key things is that they need to look at upgrading their infrastructure for what's happening around them now, for these prosumers, as we call them. They need to start looking at feed-in tariffs that will be adequate for what is required, for the backup capacity that might be needed. And in some case, they might even ask you to build in some kind of I don't want to say it's redundancy, but some kind of a backup, mechanism so that your system doesn't damage theirs also. So those are all the things that they need to start innovating as a municipality to say, what can we do? Because this is widespread and they are going to lose revenue in any case because people are installing these PV systems. Question is, how can they get into that game also and, well, I don't want to say make money, but make business sense for them as well.
Yes, like currently in Cape Town is the only one that is allowing grid feeding. But when you sell at 70 cents, they charge you back at 3 and something, which is, it doesn't really make sense. Ted, if you may speak to that.
I think we need to bring rationality to the table and get government to act with one voice. ESCOM estimated that the household capacity to generate power is around about 8 gigawatts, and that is a number that I calculated in about 2010. So there's concurrence there. But why has ESCOM done nothing about that? They're sitting on the information and they haven't done anything about it. That's the first thing. The second thing is the municipalities need to be rational as well, because if they buy power from households, they can pay up to the ESCOM tariff. They don't have to try and get it on the cheap. Because if they don't do that, they'll have no power to sell and they'll have no revenue. So it's not a question of them losing out to households generating power into the grid, because they can take that power and on-sell it at a higher rate to somebody else. So a lot of the ideas haven't been properly processed, and everybody's too scared of losing out, and nobody's looking at the bigger picture and saying, well, guys, we're in this together. If we don't cooperate, we're all going to sink in this ship.
Yes.
So that's the one thing. The other thing is that the municipalities don't have proper capacity. A lot of them are bankrupt, they've been run down, they've lost skills, there's been emphasis on the wrong filling of positions, etc. So even if we said to the municipalities today, guys, you need to publish a feed-in tariff, and if you don't do it, we'll make it at the Eskom tariff, so that it will be what you would have paid Eskom anyway. But to get the municipalities to actually address this issue,
Yes.
would be very, very difficult. It would need political will to actually get off their butts and actually get out and do something about it and facilitate private industry, households to actually work together and do it as a team effort. Individual efforts are not going to cut the mustard, unfortunately.
Yes, true. We can move on to the online audience. Another question for Benny. It says, how can BCX invest to sell our own power that we generate to our clients?
Yeah, interesting question. We're busy with some various consultants to look at alternative way how we can assist our customers and Eskom in this matter. Being part of the Telkom group, we've got a lot of facilities with a lot of roof space. We've got obviously good ties into the public and private sector. So just to, in high level, yeah, we are working with various consultants, and some news will break soon on solutions we will take to our customers and to government.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that. Hope the online client has heard. While we're still on tariffs, there is another online audience customer that is asking, what is the panel's opinion on the government's wanting to charge a rate of private installed off-grid users to pay a levy? How can the government encourage people to do this, but then want to charge for it? May we speak to that?
Okay, so what Eskom is trying to do is they see the ship is slowly sinking. So what they're trying to do is protect their revenue line. And the only way they can do that is by imposing surcharges on a, excuse me, take-or-pay basis. And that's where the 938 Rand a month fixed charge has arisen. So yes, if you can't supply and make money on the per kilowatt tariff, you then impose a fixed charge which is applicable whether you use power or not, don't use power. And that's even going to irk the customer even more. And we're going to get to a stage where people are going to say anything but Eskom power or anything but municipal power, because they're being throttled. That isn't what the problem isn't that we want to be throttled. The issue is that we need power. We need power to operate our daily lives, and we can't go forward without it. So I think that it's a very negative incentive and in fact what will happen is people will do what my electrical engineer has done. He's cut himself off the grid. He's physically gone and severed the wire between himself and the supplier. And he says, well, now you can charge yourself your fixed charge. I'm not going to pay your fixed charge because I'm not reliant on any of your power. And he's done it in a very sensible way. And that's something where there's a scope for improvement, is people or users need to start applying their minds to their consumption patterns and their consumption needs. And what he has done in his personal instance, he's taken his wiring DB board and he said, which are the critical circuits? Those need power all the time. My alarm system, maybe my fridges or whatever. And he's put them on one circuit. And he's made sure that he's got battery backup for that. And come hell or high water, he's got power for that. Then he has a nice to have sort of grid or circuit in his household, which is for the TV and for hot water, etc., etc. In fact, he's taken the hot water off the electricity grid and put it onto a solar grid. So if you apply your mind, you can probably reduce your electricity demand pattern by, depending on the type of business, I mean, but between 30 and 50% is probably possible, other than for mining and smelting industries, which obviously have a different demand profile. That is the one issue. The other issue is we're also on the cusp of new technology coming out, because all what we've seen up to now has been Eskom with baseload, sometimes, and then all the renewables which don't necessarily operate at peak demand hours. I mean, for instance, solar. Solar stops at, when the sun stops, when you can't tan anymore, about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. From then on, solar is meaningless from a generation point of view. So you've still got the big vacuums, even with renewable. And with wind, it's exactly the same thing. It's not predictable, and that's what's landed Europe and North America in the trouble. So there is new technology coming on, domestic hydrogen power available on demand. And there's no current installation in South Africa. And we are about 3 months away from that being rolled out in South Africa. So you can have domestic hydrogen on demand power, and you can have industrial hydrogen on demand power. And that would operate off grid. And in fact, to the extent that they maybe have different profiles during the 24-hour cycle, they could actually have surplus power, because you don't want to switch those on and off all the time. You want to run them constantly. They would have surplus power, which they can then help Eskom out when Eskom is also in dire need.
Yes, true. Lungile, do you also want to speak to that?
No, look, from an economics point of view, I understand what Eskom is trying to do. And not to take away from what Ted has basically said, you've got your fixed costs, you've got your variable costs. And in your municipal space, or even in your Eskom space, the people that are relying less and less on the grid are people who've got money. Let's just be very, very honest, right? So then you've got a customer who ideally would have been paying something like 6,000 Rand a month for their electricity bill, and they're in the same grid or same network as an indigent customer. And we know that we then need to sort of supplement each other and to cross-subsidize each other so that electricity becomes affordable for everybody else. But the key thing that Eskom is basically saying is that whether you use it or not, there is a fixed cost to get the electricity there. You could be traveling for an entire month, go to France. When you come back, you're going to switch on your light, the electricity is there, the infrastructure is there, the maintenance that had to happen is being done, operations, they have fixed costs, like in terms of staff, the vans, the trucks, and whatever that needs to come out. It does obviously come on the back of what they're seeing happening with the growth of the prosumer, and of course there is a loss in income, and they now need to plug that gap also. Is it a fair process? I really do think that it is fair what they are implementing. Is it nice? It's definitely not nice. And you cannot penalize people when you are unable to provide a solution yourself. So you're basically, government is, saying go off grid or let's supplement the grid. Eskom is saying, that's nice, but you owe us money. So now what do we actually do? And in the same breath, the municipalities and Eskom are not coming out to say this is a feed-in tariff that would sort of make things make sense. Everybody's mum on that aspect. So now obviously there's no incentive to actually build PV unless you just don't want to be load shed. But there's no real monetary incentive. And so they are really caught up in that funny little space, but it does emanate from a potential loss in revenue, obviously.
Yeah, true. It is predicted that if nothing is done, like urgently, load shedding is going to increase by tenfold in 2026. And we see the government plans are usually 2030, 2050. So how are we going to survive like from now till that 2030 plan that they have? May we discuss solutions? What solutions are available for CNI customers, like the commercial and the industrial?
Okay, I think once again, I need to call for rationality to prevail, because our government has committed us to a decarbonized economy, and they've gone balls to the wall doing this, and that's why Eskom didn't want to refurbish its coal fleet, because they got an instruction from government to wean yourself off coal.
Yes.
I was on Russian TV a week ago, and the question that they asked me, which left me with my back to the wall, is, you busy weaning your economy from coal, the people that are instructing you and demanding that you go decarbonize are busy buying up all your coal and using it in their power stations. True. So at the end of the day, we need to see what is feasible, what is doable. Can one decarbonize your economy in 5 years, which is seemingly what this government's trying to do? And then they come up with irrational stuff. They say they want to decarbonize by closing down 12 gigawatts of coal power.
Yes.
Fantastic. But that's 24/7 power. and they want to replace it by 12 gigawatts of intermittent power. The two don't balance. Whoever compiled that in the IRP doesn't understand energy. You can't replace 12 gigawatts of certain power with 12 gigawatts of erratic, uncertain power, because the renewable will only be available between 15 to 20, maybe 30% in summer. So you're only going to get 4 gigawatts out of the 12 gigawatts capacity. So, and seemingly somebody in government is not talking to the president, because they're making all these silly pronouncements without actually applying their minds. And as long as that prevails, we are not going to go anywhere. And we need somebody in business to stand up and say, guys, you are making mistakes. Sort it out by giving us tax incentives, we'll sort it out. Government is too cumbersome and it's got too many other issues to worry about. This issue is now at a stage where we can actually privatize the problem, and the private sector can actually collaborate with the right tax incentives to get the banks on board, and then we can move forward and we can actually have a soft landing and not a disaster situation of 10 times more load shedding, which is going to happen if we don't actually get our act together.
In 2026, it's like
Around
in a
the
few
corner.
years.
It's around the corner.
So we need to do something now to curb the problem. Yeah, the decommissioning has started. Hey, Komati, I saw they're planning their decommissioning, and
By this
as
year?
it is, yes,
Commodities this year, they're closing it down. That's 1,000 megawatts.
all down. And what is coming into the grid?
Agri-solar.
Toys.
Yeah, the solar is coming to the grid. So while we're on solutions, what solutions can we provide for the customers, CNIs?
So let me just state that Africa should not be decarbonizing. Let me make this abundantly clear. We do not have much leg room to play around with. We are not a service economy. We're still very much an industrialized economy, and we still need to grow to get to certain levels. So let me start off by saying that. In terms of solutions, government has obviously said that we are looking at renewables and we'll go heavy there. Let me just put this on the record also, that if you look at the German case, Germany has overbuilt. So to your point about that you cannot replace 10 gigs of coal with 10 gigs of solar, that doesn't make sense, which is true. And this is why then Germany had to overbuild. So Germany overbuilt by over 240%. Germany is facing load shedding even with that overbuild that they did. And it has led to the highest electricity tariffs in the world. South Africa is not, and let me say South Africans are not in a position to be the highest electricity payers in the world. We are also the most unequal society in the world, one of, suffering from a number of different issues around unemployment, youth unemployment. So we have a number of social issues, and decarbonization is a big issue, but it should not be one of our biggest issues in this country. So in terms of solutions that I definitely see working for CNI customers, you have solar that can certainly be used during the day, depending obviously on your load profile as a CNI customer. So if you obviously have very low, requirement at 8, 9 in the morning, and you're ramping out, ramping up rather throughout the day, and you're tapering off at about 4, it works perfectly well. If you are an industrial client that needs a fixed load from morning until evening, or until afternoon, you might want to supplement that with gas. So you can start looking at hybrid things. You can start bringing in batteries, but of course, and this is why I prefer the private sector approach in this aspect. This is for their own consumption. This is for their own build. They are more than willing to absorb that tariff. And trust me, once you start doing hybrid things, solar, batteries, and gas, that tariff is ridiculous. So if they're willing to absorb it, absolutely perfect. If you look at solar just for CNI, that's probably about 70 odd cents. And that's just fine if you're just doing solar. But of course, if you want some kind of reliability, then you need backup. You also need Eskom to be there also. Hence, this is where the fixed charges also come from. So there are lots of solutions that we're seeing in the large space. Just yesterday, it was the energy regulator that approved new projects. And I mean, for the first time, and I never thought I would see this in this country, we have about 20 megawatts of hydro coming in. So this is for some corporate or, industrial clients. And they're saying, I think we would like to use, hydro. And I'm thinking, okay, this is, innovative and this is, exciting. And hydro is far more reliable than wind or, solar. Others are coming in at that 100 megawatt benchmark, and which is the first that we're actually seeing of that group. Prior to that, we were seeing like your 10, 20 megawatt projects. You had your Goldfields projects, Harmony coming in at 25 megawatts, 40 megawatts. But now we're starting to see bigger projects coming, online. Those do not come on at the blink of an eye. So this was probably from last year's announcement already, from last year, June. And it took them this long to get to a point where the projects are registered. So I want to also make it very clear that if anybody is considering this, it is time consuming. And it does require a lot of money in those development costs. But I do think that there is a business case for C&I customers. And of course, it does make sense. If they're looking at solar at 70 cents, it certainly beats Eskom's Megaflex tariffs or whatever they are on, basically. So we're seeing lots of innovative things, exciting things. And in fact, a lot of large-scale developers who were doing the renewable energy projects are now entering into this C&I space because there is money to be made in that space. And of course, they can bring in all kinds of solutions and they're not limited or capped in terms of tariff or in terms of what tech they can actually use.
Yes, no, true. Under solutions, let's also discuss the residential solutions. Gideon, what solutions can we suggest for the residential customers?
So I think there are many solutions out there for residential. Obviously, there's separated into the two buckets, being the backup power, which is just to solve your load shedding problems, as well as there then is the PV solar options. Just with regards to the backup power solutions, there are many affordable solutions according to people's budgets. Starting off with when I say what is people's biggest pain point during load shedding, and funnily enough, people always say it's internet and connectivity. Our cell phones and WhatsApp and our laptops have basically become a third limb of ours. So the question is, how do we stay connected during load shedding? Most residents have one of three connections to the internet. They have fiber, LTE, and ADSL, but I think that ADSL is basically tapering off. I think it was Telkom basically said they're basically winding that down and converting everything to fiber. So I mean, we'll talk about the main two, which is the LTE and the fiber. You can get it's called a Wi-Fi UPS, which is a little device. You can purchase these from many of the major retailers, Builders Warehouse, Leroy Merlin, Takealot. They're all on the market. And essentially what this is, it's a little DC device. Retails anywhere at about a good quality one is about 1,300. Some of them go up to even 1,600, depending on the battery capacity. But essentially, this is a DC device that can run your router and your ONT. So important is when you have fiber, you've got to keep those two devices up and running. And a Wi-Fi router will be able to power both those things up for the duration of load shedding. So that's going to solve your first problem of staying connected. I know Telkom are offering this in their bundles that the customers can purchase it and just add it onto their account. So that's going to solve the first problem that people are experiencing. Then you can go up one stage. What is the next problem? The next solution is, all right, I need to work. I'm a resident. I'm working from home. I need to keep my laptop up. Your laptop generally, if it's new, should possibly make at least a stage 2 of load shedding, 2.5 hours. If not, when you start going into the stage 4 and 6 and you're going for these extended periods, or if you've got an aged laptop, and I'm saying businesses are amortizing their laptops over 3 to 5 years, even pushing them out to try to sweat the assets. So then you can get something that's called a laptop power bank. So it's a little device, looks like a normal power bank, but it's different. It can give the voltages, because obviously a normal power bank just gives kind of that USB power into your phone. But this is basically a power bank for your laptop to stay connected. And again, these you can buy them in the major retailers, Builders Warehouse, Leroy Merlin, Takealot, etc. And those, again, they're not that expensive compared to these bigger solutions. You can get them for about 1,700 Rand to power that up. Then you go into what we call is the inverter trolley scenario, which is basically it's an inverter with a battery inside, and these come in basically 720 watts, and for the entry level one with one battery. This then you plug it into your wall, and you can then power up your full home office. You can power up your TV for the duration of load shedding. And these things, it's a unique device. As soon as load shedding kicks in, it's an instant change. It's about a 10 millisecond changeover. So if you're busy working remotely or you're watching TV or Netflix, you don't feel anything. Basically it's a flicker, 10 milliseconds, and power continues. As soon as load shedding's finished, the battery recharges. Those retail at about 6,999 again in the major retailers, etc. Then what you can do is for the higher budget people, when you're still in the backup power space, is you can go into an inverter which gets wired into your DB board. Now people always ask me how much do these solutions cost, and it's pretty much how long is a piece of string. You get different types of batteries. Obviously you get the traditional historic, which has been the lead acid battery, which is a very effective technology from a cost perspective, but obviously it's an old technology. And the problem with it is doesn't do very well with daily cycling. So if you're going to be going through a continued stage 6 load shedding, those batteries are going to probably die after about 5 months. Historic load shedding, you would get, and I'm saying 3-4 years out of your batteries. And the way that Ted and Lungile have told us that the power's going is, it is risky to go and power your house of lead acid batteries, but obviously it's a cost constraint, and you may say, well, this is what I've got now, so get started now. The most important thing I would say is to get an inverter that is the heart of the system for your backup power. So if you invest in a brand that is reputable and that's going to last. And what I do recommend, if you can and you've got the ability, get an inverter that is solar ready. So at a future stage, you can then take your backup power solution and obviously convert it into an to a solar solution. These things can, and then obviously you get the new technology, which is the lithium-ion batteries. And even within the lithium-ion scale, it's quite you get quite a different range of pricing. And there's this new new concept of second life batteries, which is coming onto the market in South Africa. Still to be determined, and I'm saying how long they last. But essentially, you have all these Tesla cars, all these buses in Europe and Asia, these EVs. And basically, it comes to a certain time where they cannot be used in the vehicles. They take them out, but the battery's not dead. It's still got a lot of life in it, but it can't be used for that application. So it basically gets repurposed, and that's second life. So that's obviously at a more affordable type of price point in the lithium range. So to get started, and I'm saying on a lithium solution, you can for a small apartment or house, you could probably get for about 35,000 Rand, you could maybe get, an entry-level solution. And then obviously they go anywhere up to about 80,000 Rand for a backup power solution. And then solar, again, it's how long is a piece of string, how much battery capacity do you want, etc. And your things can range anywhere then from 150,000 up to 300,000 if you want to be like Ted's engineer and completely cut yourself off the grid, and how dependable. But I think that the most important thing here, if you are considering this, and consumers and business and work from home, is to do it. You can do it in a modular approach. If you get the basics right, you get a inverter that is a good inverter, and then ideally, if you can do the lithium batteries, that is what I recommend. And then at a later stage, you can always upgrade that into a solar solution. I think what's important is to make sure also your installer is accredited and is proficient in doing these type of installations. With obviously this increased load shedding, every person is a solar expert, and any person who's got a bucky and a screwdriver is running around installing solar. So I think it's important, obviously, even if you have the right technology and you're buying the good inverter, to make sure it's installed correctly. So those are the ways that I think residents, depending on their budget, can approach this. And I think what's important also is it's not just residents, it's also corporates with their employees working remotely. With this hybrid, this is what people need to be addressing, because if you're working at home in a hybrid environment,
let's get to that a bit later on how they can survive at home, or those ones that are working. Let's discuss the solutions for the indigent. You have been speaking about high figures there, 35,000, and it's not everybody who can afford. Yesterday, I was at the solar and electricity exhibition. Just for my house, to power a stove and a TV, they were telling me something like 70,000 rand. A combination of just an inverter and a battery and panels. So it's not everyone who can afford that. So let's talk to what solutions are available for those that cannot afford.
Okay, I'm glad you mentioned that, because, and I'm glad that Gideon mentioned the safety aspect. I think one can't over-accentuate the safety aspect, because every man and his dog is now an expert. And we had a house in Hyde Park burned down about 3 months ago, where the installation was done incorrectly. They did it in the garage. In the garage with 2 VIP or expensive cars as well. It also went up in flames. So don't ignore the safety. Don't have shortcuts on the safety. You need to segregate your circuits so that you have your high energy, like your stove, is not on electricity. Electricity is not suited to, or batteries are not suited to generate heat or cold. So your aircon, your stove, those type of items need to be different technologies. So if your stove, you'd use gas or perhaps paraffin or something along that line. The most expensive is to use or over-specify your needs for a technology that cannot cope with that sort of application. And if you do that, then primus cost maybe 50 or 100 rand, and that will sort out. And then your rest of your house cost will come from 70,000 probably down to about 30,000 or 25,000 rand. So it's critical that you don't overcommit on technology that's not suited to the application.
Okay, and in the industry, what solutions are available, right, for the low-income earners that you can look into?
So, one of the key things that we're finding in this space is that most of the solutions are actually geared towards middle-income, wealthy people. And to your point around indigent, customers, if you look at what the mean monthly salary in this country is, it's about 3,500 rand. So even a 1,000 rand solution is basically out for most people. But perhaps let me start at the 1,000 rand mark. You could get a solar home system, basic four lights, little LED lights. It's got a small little battery and a small little panel about the size of your laptop that you can put on the rooftop. These usually retail for about 1,000 rand. Of course, this is not meant for hours and hours, So basically, it will help you for a good maybe an hour and a half in the evenings, provided obviously that you don't run down that small battery. So you can't charge laptops on that battery. The most you can do is charge your cell phone, and again, not iPhones, but like a small little phone, and it's got radio also. You can, of course, scale up to those that have got TVs, and they have their different markets. You could also get solar lighting, which you can go to any retailer really, and you put it out in the sun, and it lasts for a couple of hours, whether it's 4 hours, which should cover your load shedding period, and you put it back in the house at 6 p.m. in the evening, and you'll be fine. Depending on what you wanted to actually do, these can retail from as little as 50 rand, basically. Go all the way up to about 200 rand. You could buy 4 of these, put them in different areas, of the house, and that will help you. Obviously, it doesn't sort out your connectivity issues and your phone or anything of the sort. This is just for lighting, so that your kids are able to do their homework and they don't get burnt by candles. So there's also a safety, element to it. But it's very basic, and those are more for your indigent customers.
Yes, Benny, do you want to add something on solutions?
Yeah, and I think for the corporate solutions, a lot of these solutions are built into our solutions, especially in the work from home. But the solutions or the approach we take is a consultative approach. So we get the experts in to sit with our customers to understand the application, because you don't want to use it, generate power for an application that doesn't fit, as you mentioned. So we go to a consultative approach, and then we build solutions to fit the customer's needs. And that's anything from solar to gas, depending if you have backup power. We've got a lot of work from home solutions, inverters, trolleys. So we've got a big range of solutions. But generally for our corporates, we do the consultative approach, look at the spend, look at where they want to decrease their spend, and then we craft solutions, especially for our customers. We do see a lot of customers coming to us with these big buildings they're paying rent for, and they're asking, how can we generate demand or generate revenue using our own roof space we're already paying for? And within those solutions, we've got rental solutions where people don't have the capex to buy all these solutions, but we can rent those solutions to our customers, because the payback period is generally about 10 years on the bigger solutions. A lot of malls, you'll see like Mall of Africa, they're using their roof space to create a hell of a lot of electricity, and that's the type of clients that we see and consult with at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Since I cut you, Gideon, do you want to speak to the work at home solutions?
Yes, I mean, the work from home solutions, I mean, I touched on it before. There's three types of solutions. So obviously a corporate would need to basically, I'd say, stratify their workforce. And I'm saying who is and what devices they're working off. So for example, we've worked with certain banks where they say, right, well, we've got traders who are now working from home in a hybrid environment. They need a desktop with they've got a desktop with 2 monitors. And they cannot be done no matter what. As well as a call center agent. You're working on a laptop. You're working on a desktop with 2 monitors, and I'm saying customer service, you cannot go down. So for them, you need a easy plug-and-play deployable solution, which would be the inverter trolley, which is basically, and I'm saying you can deliver it to the employee's house as a plug-and-play, set it up, and he can continue working remotely. Then, as I said before, if you've got 5,000 employees that all have a laptop in its first year of life, all they need is connectivity. You don't need to overspec and get them a trolley, right? What you can get for them is you can get them a Wi-Fi UPS, also plug-and-play solution, and keep them connected during load shedding. And I can promise you, what businesses need to do is take what is the hourly rate of an employee. You take what their cost is and how much do you pay them an hour, and I promise you, this device will pay for itself 30 times over. And I'm saying by having that person not working for 2.5 hours intermittently during load shedding, and obviously going to increase as it's going on. And some corporates, they say, with the hybrid environment, they say that employees must come into the office when there's load shedding. But that doesn't really work, because load shedding, when you have to come into the office during load shedding, you've got 2.5, and so you've got the robots don't work. So where your commute used to take you half an hour, it now takes you an hour and a half. By the time you get to the office, you've lost productivity. So that's and then again, you can take the population of your workforce and say, all right, well, this person's got an older laptop, but they don't need an inverter trolley. Well, then they can get a Wi-Fi UPS and a laptop power bank. So I think it's a case-by-case basis and needs to be analyzed, and I'm saying can be optimized. And again, when you look at what is the cost of lost productivity and what are you paying your staff to be unproductive at home, these things pay for themselves.
Yes, no, true.
Yes, just to add to Gideon, so we've seen in COVID, with everyone moving back to home, a lot of the solutions were created for work from home. Trolleys, inverter batteries, power banks, Wi-Fi UPSs. But now with the COVID and people moving back to the office, the corporates are taking this serious, because now they need to give the people the same productivity, keeping the home up, keeping the corporates up. But the corporate solutions are a bit different. So, sorry, a lot of the solutions now is moving into the corporate space, because the staff's coming back to the office, and they need to keep the staff productive at the office, hence the investment into alternative solutions and backup power.
Yes, no, true. Okay, when we started, we said the future is what we create. So let's go to our industrial customers. How can they create a better future in terms of the energy? So what solutions can they themselves provide? We have spoken about what solutions are available out there, but what solutions and what opportunities do our CNI customers have that they can tap into? Lungile, if you may speak to that.
One of the key things that we cannot underestimate is the role of industrial clients in sort of easing the issues that Eskom have. Yes, they will never solve load shedding for us, but what they can possibly do in a larger group is that if their demand is reduced, Eskom will then spend a lot less on diesel, which is one of their current, highest spends. Eskom will then be able to redirect these funds to perhaps better maintenance or to doing other things, which will also impact on our tariff, eventually. We won't have these double-digit increases that Eskom has been requesting. So I think for me, that is the value of industrial clients. What can they do? They can do absolutely anything and everything. And this is the beauty of it all. With government having lifted that 100 megawatt cap, we are seeing all kinds of innovative solutions. I spoke earlier on about hydro. Never thought that would happen for industrial clients. You've got solar that we're also seeing. We're seeing hydrogen now, especially from your platinum group miners.
Yes.
Diesel is what they're also looking at. Diesel, that's extremely expensive. I also feel that that's a lazy solution. And I'm purely saying this from that I like to see some interesting tech.
Yes,
That,
true.
that's it. We're also seeing very small scale wind turbines, like wind turbines that you can install on a rooftop in a commercial space. Obviously, what you're going to pay there is a heck of a lot of money. But for some people, it's more about demonstration of what can be done. Similar to the hydrogen guys, you've also got gas. I mean, there are clients now that are saying, okay, we are looking at natural gas. This is nothing new. Sasol has been piping it in from Pandete Mane fields, and this is why there's a big issue now around what Sasol has basically done. They've basically increased or doubled the gas tariffs. So there's lots of interesting things that we're seeing. But I think one of the very key things, when you're engaging with customers in this space is an individualized solution based on what they are trying to achieve at the end of the day. Yes. Do not go around trying to solution everybody with solar. It's not for everybody. Some people can work very well in a cogen facility. Some people need gas. I've seen some industrial clients in Wadeville, in the East Rand, and those clients are very heavy on gas. But then again, just to get a gas connection, that's 1.5 million that you have to pay. So it depends on you and your risk appetite, as well as your bank balance, and what is available out in the market for you to basically implement. But the beauty of the large industrial clients is that they could change the game as we see it. They can do anything and everything, basically.
Yes, I believe there's room for a lot of technologies. It's not only wind and solar that really is a new technology that must solve our problems. People must innovate. That's where our CNI customers come in. Ted, what solutions can it bring?
I think it's a very exciting future because, and I would urge businesses to think out of the box, because load shedding is very disruptive. Forget about the hour or two that you're off. The problem is if you're a mother or a father, you've got children at home, you need to know that they're also okay. So I would say that any progressive organization wouldn't just look at keeping the office going, but would also look at seeing what the impacts are in the domestic lives of their workers, so that even the children are not impacted so negatively by load shedding when they come home and want to do homework, or need food when they get home after work. So I think that the scope is actually probably much wider than what we're thinking and talking about up to now, and that anybody that's progressive will say, hang on, I know this costs money. We need the government to provide tax incentives one way or the other. And then secondly, we need to look at the holistic situation, not just at, well, what is dear Johnny doing with his computer on or off or whatever, but also that his house is secured, because if there's no load shedding going on in the residential suburbs, the thieves and the crooks know about that. Yes. And they're going to be accessing stress in your house while you're trying to do some work at the office. So I think one needs to open up your mind and really say, well, what is a holistic solution? This is for the office. This is to keep the traffic lights going, and there were efforts to keep the traffic lights going, but seemingly those batteries must have died because they're not working anymore. And then also look at home solutions for not just the worker, but for his dependents, so that they are safe and also can do their homework before you get home at night when the load shedding is on.
Yes, no, true. To my online audience, I can see your questions on battery storage. Can we go back to them later after we discuss this question? We want to discuss on the 100 megawatts cap. We have mentioned it a bit. Will it give our CNI customers opportunities now that it's been removed altogether?
Most definitely. But the key thing is that there is a lag between these announcements and when things are officially implemented. Like I said, it does take a lot of time to develop these projects. It also takes money. So if you're looking at a 1.5 billion rand, 100 megawatt project, the development costs on that can be 1 to 2% of the total project value as well. If you're looking at funding this, going to debt capital markets and getting money there, that is also going to take time also to get to financial close. There's some environmental work that you have to do. Obviously it's not the full scope of what we're used to. There's technical work, the owner's engineers, drawings. There's so much work that needs to go into these projects. And the key thing is that if you're building plants of that magnitude, the 500 megawatts, the 1,000 megawatts, this is when now there's very serious interface with Eskom. Very few entities are able to build, operate at that level. And we haven't seen this in this country. I think you'll find it with Sasol. Yes. Basically. But for the most part, they still have, even at Sasol, there's still an Eskom interface, and which is what we are going to experience even with these large customers. And let's not forget that they are not utilities. They are simply just entering into this space now. They do not necessarily have those technical skills. So it's something that they now are going to, so we're actually going to have mini utilities. And these mining houses, some of them are going to convert into utilities, which is something very, very new. So there's lots of cost, lots of money, there's lots of time to get to that point. But what this 100 megawatts lifting or cap has basically done, it's said the future is yours. Go do what makes sense. Go and do big innovative things. And I will repeat again, one of the things I love about it is that it does not say to the South African consumer, you are tied for 20 years to this tariff. It's got nothing to do with the South African consumer. It's everything to do with that particular client and what they've decided to build and what makes sense for them. And that's the beauty of it all.
Yes, yes. Ted, would you like to speak to that?
I think I want to tie up to what Lungile said. And this is a new sector. And when you opened up the conference, you said, you are building your future. And that's exactly what's happening now. This sector has been closed for over 100 years. It's now opened up. So yes, besides it being a new sector, it also needs new skills and new funding models, etc., and new EIA requirements, etc. So it's a whole new domain. And I mean, it's very, very exciting. But by the same token, it needs to be done, because it's critical to our economy, it needs to be done in a responsible manner.
Yes, true.
If I could just come in there, I mean, we've been speaking about solar gas, but I mean, we have facilities, for instance, in Bronkhorstspruit, which supply the BMW Roslyn facility. That is biomass. That is deemed to be green, and it's not even in close proximity. It's still further off. So there was some wheeling going from, that particular site, here. You can even go into the small modular reactor space. Obviously, we are still developing the commercialization of these SMRs. But in 10 years' time, what is stopping a large miner from running their own small modular reactor? I'm very excited for what's going to come ultimately.
Yes. No, thank you so much. There's a customer who's asking, what are the alternatives? What alternatives like PBMR? Why are they not pursued?
Okay, so Eskom ran a PBMR program. They ran it for the best part of about 8 years. They blew about 40 billion rand on it and then promptly shut it down. What's happened in the meantime is that countries like China and Russia have actually taken the baton and have actually developed. China has, in the last 6 months, connected 2 small-scale nuclear modular reactors to their grid. Why they're connected to the grid, I'm not sure, because they're supposed to be standalone. But I suppose just to prove the industrial robustness of their system. Russia has developed their own small-scale nuclear reactors, and they range from about 20 megawatts to about 200 megawatts, which is more or less what a small town or a mid-sized town would require. Let's just get back to the scale. The 100 megawatts is actually a lot of power. And in this country, there are very few companies that are in that sort of category. The EUIG users, the energy-intensive user groups, they use typically about 50 megawatts. A big smelter uses typically 60 megawatts. Goldfields needs about a total capacity of about 600 megawatts. Billiton's aluminium smelters use 4 gigawatts each in Mosel and in Hillside. So for most people, for most CNI customers, they're not looking at those mega plants, unless if they want to go into the energy or utility business. For most of them, it's much smaller, between 10, 15 megawatts maximum sort of thing. And those, the banks would really need to come out and develop the models and the funding. And it's really, once it's working, it's a bit like funding Eskom. Once it's working and there isn't corruption because of your own plant, the amortization is actually pretty risk-free. And it should be it's a very low risk premium because the technology is, electricity technology is more than 100 years old. Battery technology goes back to 1813 for the lead acid batteries. So we're not talking about radical risk in rolling out these things, but it's just that we've opened up our eyes to the new opportunities. And I think that's where people need to get themselves up to speed and see how they can engage in this new economy.
Yes, no, true. One of the online participants is asking, let's go to the battery storage because it keeps coming. Everyone wants to know, what is the state of the battery storage technology currently in South Africa?
It is expensive. Let me start there. It is extremely expensive. If you're looking at solar plus BESS, which is battery energy storage solutions, you're looking at a tariff that is triple just solar on its own. Right, and Eskom has gone to market and they've procured. I think they announced it was a month or so ago, and they're going to start importing them. Now, the thing with battery, especially of that commercial size, you install them. And of course, you then operate them. And the key thing is that they are installing them as that to help with the variability that is introduced by renewables on their grid, ultimately, right? So that stop-start thing that typically happens. These batteries, for the most part, can give you up to, what is it, 4 hours?
Okay, so the one Eskom is starting off with is 360 megawatts.
Yes.
So that's 60 megawatts times 6 hours.
Okay.
So it's not big.
No, they're not big at all, but they're extremely expensive also. And so they give you that little bit of backup that you actually require. Now, again, when we're looking at batteries have cycles. So if Eskom is doing what they're going to be doing, which is load shedding at these extreme stage 4 and stage 6, it basically means that their battery cycles are not going to be as high as, let's say, the batteries that we see in El Centro, which is in California. Right. So it means that the billions that they've spent on those batteries, ultimately we're not going to get a 20-year life out of them. Yes. If we're lucky, maybe let's say anything between 8 to 10 years, ultimately. Again, then the batteries need to be decommissioned at some point. Speaking to Gideon's point, then they could possibly try and reuse or repurpose in some other industrial application. But for the most part, these are things you need to take out and throw away. Yes. There's no battery recycling scheme going on globally that I'm aware of. So the billions that they would have spent in 8 to 10 years, those are out as well. Is it a necessary solution? Yes, because South Africa is hesitant to install gas tech at the moment or to have, LNG, because ultimately if you have such a high penetration of renewables and what we are hoping to actually grow over the years, you would need some renewables, you would also need a lot of gas also, just for that variability. So because we are blind to what gas provides, we are now going towards batteries, which, yes, they work, but they're extremely expensive.
Yeah, we've spoken more of a lot of solutions, but we didn't touch anything green. Anyone interested in talking about green technology? Anything green?
Well,
Ted?
I think we're once again on the cusp of developments. You know, the EU, in fact, has now just recently, because of their dilemma, categorized gas as sort of semi-green. So, and in talking about gas, South Africa doesn't have a massive gas supply. So everything has to be imported. But our neighbor, right next door to us, Mozambique, has just discovered Rovuma Basin, which has 200 TCFs of gas. Now, the North Sea gas has been running for over 40 years, and they started off with 8 TCFs. So in terms of scale, the gas available in Mozambique, in Rovuma, if they can sort out the security issue there, could power the whole of Africa for more than 400 years.
Sure.
So,
yes, okay.
again, we need our government to wake up and go and talk to our neighbors in Mozambique and say, listen here, you don't have enough demand in your country to make the gas viable. But if we add our demand to it and you give us a reasonable price and security of supply, we could actually cooperate on this and create a regional grid like we used to have when Eskom was running well and had coal power stations. So yes, I mean, and that will certainly tide us over in the next 10 to 15 years until the new green technologies have matured and the storage has matured. And you mentioned the problems with battery cycles. I mean, if the most batteries, you cannot, if you deplete their power, they are redundant. You can't use them again. You can only use or draw down about 50% of the amount of power that they store. Otherwise, you destroy the battery. So those technologies need to mature so that they can be more useful and can be more robust. The second thing is, if you're running with batteries as your only storage, and Eskom's load shedding is longer than what it takes to charge the battery.
Yes, no.
Your battery doesn't charge high enough to be ready for the next load shedding cycle. And when we had load shedding 3 times a day, even I've got a whole week's worth of battery power. But because the power wasn't coming on for long enough to recharge them, my batteries conked out. I mean, I drew them down too far and I have to throw them away. And it's a very expensive exercise.
Yes, yes. Now I've experienced it as well in the office. Like where you come, was it stage 4, where you have 3 times load shedding, and yeah, it was a challenge. There's somebody here, an environmentalist like me, interested in the recycling plans for solar and battery systems. Do we have any as the...
So there are battery recycling operations in the UK. I know that Chloride, which used to have a presence in South Africa, has got a major battery. So your lead acid batteries are typically lead and the acid. So the lead can be recycled and into new batteries. It's a bit of a complicated process. But in terms of the wind turbines, unfortunately, most of that is carbon fiber, and that's not recyclable. In fact, there's quite a big business in America now where you open up wind turbine graveyards and you charge people to take control or ownership of their redundant wind turbines. In terms of solar panels, again, they lose their efficiency at the rate of anything between 5 and 15 to 20% a year. So even they have a limited lifespan. And as far as I know, you're right, nobody is recycling solar panels at this stage. And it's also difficult because to dispose of them is also not an easy job because they contain toxic rare metals. And if you get that into your water supply, you'll be poisoning your people. So there needs to be, and in terms of that, I mean, our legislation is years behind. And again, there's scope for a lot of improvement to just make sure, because having power at any cost is not an option. It's got to be reliable, it's got to be safe, and it's got to be affordable. Those are the 3 critical criteria going forward. And I think that the ballpark will change as the technologies mature, but we need to give them time. You know, aircraft took 30, 40 years to mature to where we are today, which is highly fuel efficient passenger aircraft. Computer technology, I mean, I was starting work at the cusp of your desktops, and they started off with 10 megabytes hard drive, which was the state of the art. And now you don't get a computer with less than a gigabyte worth of storage. So it will come in good time. But the market is now certainly strong enough to incentivize anybody in that business to really get going. And I think that opens up a whole new market for BCX and its suppliers. There's a big challenge lying ahead of you to keep track of technology and then to increase your penetration. I mean, the market isn't even near saturation point. I think it's less than 5% saturation. So the future for your business must be very, very good.
Absolutely.
Yes, no, it's just starting. Gideon, and anything on battery storage that we discussed earlier on?
So I mean, just to retouch just on the residential side. So I mean, obviously there's the two technologies. There's the lead acid as well as the lithium. So again, just to be clear, and I'm saying if you're going the backup power solution, you have two options: the lead acid and the lithium. If you're going solar, don't even consider lead acid because they'll die after 3 months of daily cycling. Only go straight on to the lithium.
Yeah. Okay.
With regards to the lead acid on a backup, I mean, just obviously people go to it because it's it's tried and tested, but more importantly, it's a lot cheaper than the lithium ion. And if you've only got X amount of money, you'd rather say, well, I can buy lead acid 3 times for the price of a lithium, but the lithium may last you 6 times as long. But people, if you've got this amount of money, this is what you can spend. Just that the people must be aware of the limitations. The average lead acid battery, as Ted said, is only supposed to go down to 50% depth of discharge. And depending on the inverters, why is the inverter so important? Because some inverters don't have a cutoff. It will drain it down to 99% until it just shuts down. And depending on the type of battery you've got, I'm saying you could get 180 cycles, some you get up to 400 cycles. And a cycle, and I'm saying when you're on stage 6, your cycles are going fast. Historically, you could get 4 years out of it. Yeah. I think obviously with the current load shedding, it's getting reduced. I think the most important thing, again, I can't reiterate this enough, is the brand and the warranty that comes with the batteries. And specifically on the lithium, there's a lot of just as every person with a bakkie and a screwdriver is a solar installer, every person now who's got an import license goes onto Alibaba and imports lithium batteries. And what's most important, A, is lithium is dangerous, and to make sure that and I'm saying it's safe, but B, also, when you're investing at this higher price, you need to make sure people are offering 10-year warranties on your batteries for your lithium. You want to make sure that the warranty is not going to outlast the company that's giving you the warranty.
True. Yeah, I saw it yesterday. The issue of importing yesterday in that exhibition, we had batteries that they say they have no written protocol yet approved. So how do you sell something that has not yet been approved to work in South Africa? Yeah. So we really need to be careful when it comes to that. So yes, there are financing options that are available in the space that we can look into as the CNI customers, or even for residential. Benny mentioned something about rental options and stuff. So may we discuss what financing options are available? Ted?
Okay, so I mean, there's quite a wide range, depending on what level of liquidity your business has and what you can afford. But don't ignore the current Section 12 tax allowances, because depending on how you install and how you apply for those allowances, it could be quite an affordable solution. But then you need to know that you are following the right protocols, and you need to consult with somebody that's totally on top of the tax regime in South Africa, for instance. I see that there's accelerated allowances depending on the ownership structure, and of course the tax allowances are only applicable to ownership. Not if you're going to be renting, you're going to be writing off the cost of rental as you incur it anyway. But certainly the financial institutions haven't really got up to speed to offer packages where they take full cognizance, and the government hasn't updated the tax allowances wide enough to make it available to every person. I mean, if you had to forecast nirvana, householders should be able to include the financing of the alternatives from their bonds, The banks need to sort that out.
Yes.
Because they've already got a bond on the place. And it's a fixture. So the fixture will belong to whoever owns the house, whether it's the owner, pays it off, or else the bank when they repossess it. So that avenue needs to open up completely. And then in terms of the other financing solutions, I think that as the technology is labeled properly and more reliable, the other financing opportunities will start developing. The big problem is, as you said, you don't want to go to an exposition, buy a battery or system that is not recognized, doesn't have a label, as you indicated, and then you finance it, and then it crashes within 6 months or a year, and then there's no residual value in the system. So those issues need to mature, and I think we're still very early in the life cycle of providing off-grid solutions.
Oh, yes, Lungile, take us through some financing options.
So there are some financing options. So what we're seeing typically, especially with the larger projects, like your 100 megawatts and above, is that you have rather miners who have gone through a very good commodity cycle, and so they're cash flush at the moment. So they're actually funding those on balance sheet. They're not interested in going to banks or anything of the sort. And that's perfectly fine. Then there are those who are going through funds. So there's a fund that I'm aware of called the Mahlako Energy Fund, for instance.
Yes,
and
yes.
they have done they did the Amazon 10 megawatt facility, and I think most recently they concluded a deal on the Harmony 25 megawatt facility as well. So of course you can go to those funds and apply, and they'll sort of co-fund with you. Then of course those who need to go to their banks, you can obviously approach your commercial bank and ask for a debt facility. They will take it through perhaps the normal project finance route, or they could even do just funding on your balance sheet. I think one of the key things is that these are not 20-year like what we're typically used to. It's not a 20-year power purchase agreement, and therefore you need to sort of use your project finance terms. This is more of, are you looking for a facility, 100 million rand facility, to do your own solar PV or whatever facility it is that you want to do? And they'll probably take it over a 5-year term with fixed costs, because I mean it's yours, and there's a lot of reduced risk because you are not relying on Eskom.
Yes.
There's no buyer out there. It's for your own consumption. But remember that also it then reduces your reliance on Eskom. It reduces your overall electricity costs, because you've got this also. So your payback periods also vary. And if you look at increasing electricity costs, especially over the next five years, where I think is it next year, Eskom is talking about over 30% increase. Then business cases make sense almost immediately. And the payback then moves from, let's say, 10 years down to 5. So there's lots of ways of doing it. And to Ted's point about the tax, I would certainly say consult with tax lawyers and people or tax accountants, because I am aware that there are some people that are installing these solar PV systems and they're not even paying a cent. They're simply just using it through their tax rebates, and it's sorted out. But definitely do consult whatever it is that you're trying to actually do.
Yes, no, true. Thank you for that. What incentives are there? Like, what can motivate someone to go into solar besides being bothered by load shedding? What incentives are in place that we can maybe tap into?
The biggest benefit is reliability. I mean, I don't think any business can afford to go through the future where the business cycle is being interrupted erratically and for indeterminate periods of time. I mean, if you're running an extrusion business or a smelting business, for instance, you can't switch those things off. And if you do switch them off, or you don't have backup power, the whole thing freezes, and it'll take you 6 months to clean the pots or your extrusion machine, a couple of hours or days to clean them up. So I think the biggest incentive is to have reliability and sustainability in supply of power. The affordability issues and the structural issues and so on, those are nice to have. Those are the cherries on top. The
Yes.
critical part is to try and just make sure that you stay in business and that you don't lose your customers because you can't supply your goods on time and at the quality that you have built up your reputation with over the last couple of years. So I think that is probably, from my point of view, is the biggest
Is an
incentive,
incentive.
is to just stay in business and make sure you've got enough power to actually run your business.
Okay, maybe from the government policies as well, from anything, is there any incentives that the government is offering that you know of, Lungile?
So, you know, government has mentioned things that they would like to do, and I think one of the key things that they've mentioned are the feed-in tariffs. And as I explained earlier on, we're very far from this point. So, to Ted's point, any incentive at the moment is about you as a consumer. It's about you and your customers. It's about staying in business and not experiencing load shedding and not being inconvenienced and not going through that emotional turmoil that was, you know, mentioned earlier on. But in terms of, is there anything that you're going to get out? Absolutely not. I installed my solar PV, I think, in 2020. And trust me, if there was a way that I could recover the money that I spent, I would be on it. But as it stands now, there's absolutely nothing.
Oh, on incentives, anything from you, Gideon? What's the incentive for residential people to consider solar?
So yeah, I mean, as Ted said, there's no economic incentive. Specifically, there's no tax write-off that at least that I'm aware of at the moment for a resident. I mean, this is more in the corporate space where you can write it off. Again, it's just to ensure that you have uninterrupted supply. And I'm saying, going back to that emotional incentive for yourself. And as we said, you need to reinvent your future. And I'm saying you can't, let's say, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And if I'm saying, just expecting load shedding to magically disappear, I mean, I think that's insane, and it's just not going to happen. So we need to, as you open up, when you take the bull by the horns, and the incentive is to make sure that your life is back to normal as well as possible.
Yes, no, true. Do you want to speak to that, Penny, as well?
Yeah, I think for the financial incentive, there is no financial incentive, but if you're in business, the incentive is to look after your customers, and that's why we're in business. So if you can keep your operations running, keep your tills running, keeping your branch up and running, keeping your staff productive, ultimately you look after your customer, and that should be your incentive. And I think that in BCX, that's why one of our mottos is we build solutions the way we learn, live, and work, and ultimately look after your customers, because that's our customers at the end of the day.
Yes. Oh, thank you so much. May we give opportunity to our online participants? There's a few questions that we can run through before we conclude. A participant is asking, is there any consideration for local production of equipment like batteries and panels? As you spoke to some borders that will be closed. And
You know, so part of government's energy plan, one of the things was to basically limit that local manufacturing requirement on especially solar PV panels. But I am aware that the South African PV Industry Association is actually in consultation with government now to look at what they could perhaps localize or manufacture in future. But government has basically said that to fast track the implementation of these new projects, bid window 5 and bid window 6, they're going to reduce the local content requirement. So if you're looking at going into that space and into manufacturing, I would say I'd be very wary at the moment. The two factories that I am aware of have spent a lot of money scaling up, getting to a point where they can manufacture, and now government has basically thwarted all of their plans. So one of the key things that government has to consider is what are we saying, and we need that policy coherency from the DTI, from Treasury, and from the DMRE, so that it helps manufacturers actually plan and have a proper idea of what's coming, and they can scale up accordingly. And that plan, we need to stick to that plan also.
yes. Ted, would you
The
like
other
to
thing is,
speak?
of course, you know, it's fine to say I want to manufacture locally, but if it's what I predict and think is going to happen, in that the technology is going to be changing radically, makes it very difficult to encourage local production, because you gear up for one technology and then it disappears because there's another technology that's overtaken it. So from that point of view, I don't expect major investment in any particular technology until the technology itself has actually matured, and that will take time. It's not going to happen overnight.
You know, and just to Ted's point, we have moved from your fixed mount, we've moved to tracking. We now have bifacial panels. Now we are talking about manufacturing roof tiles from solar. So yes, you can plan and you can have all these grand ideas, but it just might be cheaper importing this from China.
Okay, yes, thank you so much for that. There's one participant here. It's not really related to what we're discussing, but he wants to know, what are we doing regarding the skills that the Western are taking from us and draining the country?
The skills.
Yeah, if you can talk to the skills shortage in the country. In
So
terms of-
it is a concern. I mean, Koeberg has lost more than 60 technical staff in the last 12 months. And the same thing is happening elsewhere. It's something that needs to be addressed urgently. And I mean, while we're talking about skills, everybody first complaint about coal is that it's dirty. It's seen as a very dirty industry.
Yes, yes.
I can take you to power stations overseas where you can be right next to the power station and you won't, other than for the vibration of the turbine, you won't know that you're standing next to a power station. So we mustn't judge coal by the way Eskom has been doing it in the last 10 or 20 or 30 years.
Yes.
There is now clean coal technology. There is coal technology available that guarantees 95% effluent capture. Now, if we can reduce the waste from coal by 95%, and we've got more than 400 years worth of coal in the ground, then maybe we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We need to just have a look at what's available and open up our minds and re-engineer what we've got to be more suitable for the future. And that goes with most of the power stations. They can be retrofitted, they can be cleaned up completely. We need to sort out the supply chain of the feedstock, that we don't feed the power stations with bad coal, which we know is going to cause a problem. I mean, if you go into the micronizing of coal, and I've got a colleague who's done that now, you can separate all the impurities out of the coal. And that happens, coal gets pulverized just before it gets injected into the furnace anyway.
Yes.
If you pulverize it earlier and you remove all the impurities, you end up burning pure carbon. And then the carbon that the carbon dioxide that comes out of the chimney, you can capture, and that is used to make soda drinks. Your carbonated drinks, it's carbon dioxide. In America, they sell that stuff. And yeah, we import the carbon dioxide to pump into our beer and into our cool drinks and carbonated drinks. So there are lots of opportunities. You just need to have the inspiration to open up your eyes and have a look and say, guys, you know what? We're not in a static environment. We're in an evolutionary environment. And we need to just be abreast of what is happening around the world. It's happening all around us. And you can't be stuck on phobias for the rest of your life. The world is changing, and it's changing fast. And we need to jump on that bus before it leaves us behind.
Yes, thank you, Ted. Let me take that as your closing remarks, right? Because of time. Lungile, it's your closing remarks.
So, you know, just to Ted's point very briefly, the best way to capture carbon is just planting trees.
You
Yes, okay. Yeah, I've been to Kusile. I've seen the carbon capture technology, and I'm not so sure how it's working, but yeah, they have it. Let's hope it works. Ben, no, please, Gideon, let me start with you. Your closing remarks.
Just thanks for having me on the panel. And yeah, I think the most important thing is just how you started is, you know what I'm saying, is the best way to predict the future is to invent it. And you know what I'm saying, we need to take ownership of ourselves and our businesses and our lives, and not just sit back as these helpless creatures complaining. about Eskom and load shedding. I'm saying there's solutions out there from any price bracket, whether you're residential, whether you're corporate, and I'm saying or an industrial, and take ownership of your lives.
Yes, no, true. Benny?
Yeah, I think for me it was really insightful, and just listening to everything going on, there's really a lot to consider for our customers and consumers to keep their business operational and managing the cost. But as much as the future seems dark by what we hear, I do think it creates a hell of an opportunity for innovation. It will create jobs. The ripple effect for the innovation will happen out of this is actually the exciting portion. And I think at BCX, we've got solutions, finance solutions for our customers. The banks are approaching us to finance solar because they see the markets. And we've got a lot of innovations that we want to bring to our customers on the back of this dilemma that we're in. And just for the audience or anyone, if you want any more info, just mail power@bcx.co.za, and one of our consultants will contact you, and we've got access to the experts in any case to consult with our customers.
Yes, no. Thank you so much. Thank you to my panelists for such an insightful conversation. Hope our online audience benefited a great deal from it. Thank you so much for joining in. We received your questions, and apologies, we couldn't get to all of them because of time. But as Benny has said, if you have any questions, please feel free to email to power@bcx.co.za. And thank you so much for joining in, and looking forward to collaborating in the future. Have a good day.